A warm California afternoon draped itself across the quiet suburban street like a gentle blanket, the kind that makes people step outside just to feel the air on their skin. It was the sort of day when neighbors carried wine glasses outdoors, the scent of barbecues drifted lazily across hedges, and laughter wandered freely between lawns. Inside the modest two-story house on Willow Lane, Evelyn Collins moved through the kitchen with the steady rhythm of a woman who had spent a lifetime finding comfort in small routines. She slid a tray of shortbread cookies from the oven, their buttery scent curling through the air like an old memory. Evelyn didn't cook because she had to. She cooked because it was the only part of this house that still felt like hers. She placed the cookies neatly on a tray, smoothing her apron as she walked out toward the backyard where her daughter Lauren had gathered friends. Colleagues from her corporate firm, fitness group women who spoke in quick, chirpy voices, and Eric's golf buddies who greeted one another with loud backslaps. Evelyn approached quietly, carrying the tray as if it contained something sacred. She offered the cookies with a soft smile, but the moment felt like a performance, one in which she was present only as background decoration. A woman in a beige sundress took a cookie and murmured politely, but her eyes were already drifting back toward the louder, brighter circle where Lauren stood. Lauren, with her perfect blonde bob, dramatic hand gestures, and polished voice, seemed to float at the center of the gathering. She held her cocktail like an accessory and looked around like she owned the sunlight itself. When she noticed Evelyn, she didn't soften. She smirked and waved a dismissive hand toward her. "Oh, she just kind of stays here," she said, her tone light, but sharp enough to slice straight through skin. For a second the group hesitated, a small awkward pause, then nervous laughter followed, the kind people use when they don't know which side to stand on. Evelyn swallowed hard. She kept her eyes down, pretending she didn't feel the sting. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the tray, but no one noticed except her. Eric glanced at her briefly, offered a half-hearted smile, then looked away, choosing comfort over courage. That hurt more than the laughter. She turned quietly, walked back inside the house, and placed the tray on the counter. The warmth from the cookies faded faster than her dignity had. For the rest of the afternoon, Evelyn drifted through the kitchen like a shadow, clearing glasses, gathering plates, wiping spills, pretending she wasn't listening to the conversations that seemed to erase her existence altogether. She washed dishes long after the guests had left, running her hands under the water until the skin wrinkled. When the house finally fell silent, Lauren's heels clicked upstairs, Eric muttered a muted "Thanks, Evelyn," and the lights dimmed as if her presence drained the color from the walls. 3 days later, Evelyn stood in the kitchen again, this time preparing tea in the quiet morning light. Her hands felt heavier than usual, as though carrying a weight she couldn't set down. When a glass accidentally slipped from her grip and shattered across the tile, she bent down to gather the pieces. Her knees cracked softly as she reached for the shards. That's when Lauren entered, her voice sharp as a blade. "What did you do now?" Evelyn looked up, startled. I'm sorry. It just... You should know your place," Lauren snapped, cutting her off like she was swatting away a fly. "Don't think you have a right to be here." Evelyn froze, a piece of glass still between her fingers. "Lauren, I'm your mother." Lauren scoffed. "Being old doesn't give you a free pass to make messes and expect sympathy." Evelyn tried to stand, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean..." "Enough," Lauren hissed. "If you don't leave this house, I'll call the cops." For a moment, time stretched into something unrecognizable. Evelyn looked at the daughter she once held through sleepless nights, the child she fed, the toddler whose scraped knees she kissed. Lauren was already dialing the phone, her expression cold, confident, certain she could get away with anything. Evelyn didn't wait to hear the full conversation. She walked out into the backyard, into the small patch of earth where her rosemary and daisies grew in quiet defiance. She stood barefoot among the flowers she had planted, the garden she had tended long before Lauren ever knew what a mortgage was. The sun felt too bright, the silence too sharp, and the truth too painful. Her daughter didn't see her as family anymore. She saw her as a nuisance, problem, a burden. But something else sparked in Evelyn then. A flicker of memory, of who she used to be before life wore her down into something small. This wasn't Lauren's house. Not really. It wasn't Eric's either. This house, its deed, its history, its every nail and beam, still belonged to Evelyn. Her name had never left the papers. She had never transferred ownership. She had never signed it away. She exhaled slowly. For the first time in years she felt awake. And that moment, quiet, trembling but powerful, became the beginning of a storm Lauren never saw coming. Evelyn stepped back inside the house, her heart pounding like a quiet drum in her chest, as the reality of what had just happened settled onto her shoulders. She walked slowly through the hallway, her gaze drifting over the family photos Lauren insisted on displaying. Pictures of vacations, photo shoots, smiling faces frozen in frames that told half-truths. Evelyn noticed something she had never allowed herself to see before. There wasn't a single photo of her among them. Not one. Years of presence erased with the ease of a delete button, replaced with curated perfection that left no room for the woman who had given Lauren life. She stopped in the hallway, feeling the weight of that erasure settle like dust on her skin. How long had Lauren been pushing her out without her noticing? How long had she been shrinking herself just to keep peace in a house that no longer wanted her warmth? As Evelyn reached her bedroom, the smallest room in the house, tucked away behind the laundry area like an afterthought, she sat on the edge of the bed and took in the quiet. The faint hum of the air conditioner was the only sound, a dull reminder of the house's heartbeat that no longer matched hers. She folded her hands in her lap and tried to steady her breathing. The sharpness of Lauren's words echoed through her mind. "If you don't leave this house, I'll call the cops." Her own daughter, the girl she had worked 3 jobs to raise, threatening her with police. She felt a pain so deep it didn't come out as tears, just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The door creaked open without a knock. Eric stood there, his eyes avoiding hers as if looking at her might force him to acknowledge the cruelty happening under his own roof. He cleared his throat. "Evelyn, maybe you should give Lauren some space. She's stressed." The excuse was as weak as his voice. Evelyn studied him for a moment. The man who had once called her mom during the early years of marriage, who used to bring her flowers on Mother's Day, who used to seek her advice on everything. Now he stood there like a guest in her presence, choosing comfort over righteousness. Evelyn didn't argue. She simply nodded, her silence louder than any words she could have spoken. Eric shifted awkwardly, muttered something about being late for a meeting, and left the room, closing the door behind him. The sound felt final. Evelyn leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees as her eyes drifted to the small wooden drawer beside her bed. Inside it lay documents she hadn't touched in years. Property papers, bank files, letters from her late husband. She reached for the drawer with trembling fingers and pulled it open. The deed to the house sat neatly inside. Her name printed clearly at the top. Her full name. Evelyn Grace Collins. Not Lauren's. Not Eric's. Hers. Completely hers. She traced her fingers over the ink, feeling a surge of something fierce rise within her chest. This house, this home was never theirs to claim or threaten her with. She had inherited it from her parents, remodeled it with her husband, and kept it running long after he passed away. She had paid the taxes, maintained the repairs, and protected its walls through storms, hardships, and loneliness. This house carried her history, her blood, yet she had allowed others to make her feel like a guest in it. A sudden knock startled her. Lauren walked in without waiting for permission, her expression stone cold. "Did you hear me earlier?" she asked, arms crossed tightly. "I'm serious, Mom. You can't just stay here and make things uncomfortable. This is our home now. You're just complicating things." Evelyn looked at her daughter, really looked at her, seeing not the child she raised but the woman shaped by entitlement and ungratefulness. Lauren continued, her voice hardening. "You can pack your things. I'll arrange a ride for you. Maybe a senior home or something. They'll take better care of you." She said it casually, as if she were discussing getting rid of an old piece of furniture. Evelyn stood up slowly. For the first time she felt taller than Lauren. Stronger. Older in a way that carried wisdom instead of weakness. This house, Evelyn began, her voice steady, is mine. Lauren blinked, caught off guard. What are you talking about? She demanded. Evelyn held up the deed, letting the morning light illuminate the undeniable truth printed across the page. My name, Evelyn said quietly, is the only name on these papers. It always has been. Lauren's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, words scrambling in her throat but refusing to come out. For the first time in years, Evelyn watched her daughter fall silent. She had no rehearsed insults to hide behind, no entitlement to shield her, no power to wield, only shock, pure undeniable shock. Evelyn folded the deed and held it close to her chest like a shield she had forgotten she owned. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't threaten. She simply said, with the calm authority of someone reclaiming their identity, I am not leaving. Not my home. Not my life. And with that single sentence, the balance of power shifted. The woman they had underestimated was no longer invisible. A storm was rising, and this time it belonged to Evelyn. Lauren stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes locked on the document in Evelyn's hands as if it were a weapon she never expected her mother to hold. For years she had assumed the house belonged to her by default, because she lived in it, because she earned more, because she believed age made Evelyn irrelevant. But the truth, printed in bold ink, shattered that illusion with a force she didn't know how to absorb. Evelyn watched her daughter's expression shift through disbelief, confusion, anger, and finally fear. The kind of fear that comes when the ground beneath you suddenly isn't yours anymore. Lauren tried to steady herself, attempted to reach for her usual dominance, but her voice trembled when she finally managed to speak. This can't be right. Dad said we would take over. He told me. Evelyn cut her off gently, her voice calm but sharper than Lauren had ever heard. Your father never promised this house to you. He told me you weren't ready for responsibility. And today you proved he was right. Lauren's jaw clenched, her pride striking back. So what now? You think you can just control everything? You're old, Mom. You can barely manage yourself. How are you going to manage a whole house? Her words were meant to sting, but they landed weaker this time, slipping into the room like defeated arrows. Evelyn took a quiet breath, letting the insult roll off her like rain on stone. She had endured far worse, survived far harsher storms than a daughter with a sharp tongue and an inflated ego. Age, Evelyn replied softly, doesn't erase ownership, and it doesn't erase my rights. Eric entered the hallway then, drawn by the tension thick enough to cut through. When his eyes fell on the deed in Evelyn's hand, his face paled too. Lauren, is that what I think it is? He asked hesitantly. Lauren shot him a glare, but Eric wasn't looking at her anymore. His gaze was fixed on Evelyn, the woman who had housed them, fed them, solved their crises, and carried their burdens without applause. Slowly, guilt flickered across his expression. Evelyn, we didn't know, he whispered. But the truth was harsher, they never bothered to know. They never wanted to know because assumptions were easier than gratitude. Without another word, Evelyn walked past them, her steps slow but steady, like someone reclaiming sacred ground. She went into the living room, the same room where she had once rocked Lauren to sleep, where she had decorated countless birthdays, where she had cried alone after her husband died. She stood in the center of it now, her presence no longer small or apologetic. From behind her, Lauren's voice rose again, shaky but desperate. So what? You're just going to kick us out? Is that what this is? Evelyn didn't turn around. I am not kicking you out, she said quietly. I'm giving you a choice. Respect me in my own home, or leave willingly. The silence that followed felt endless. Lauren stared at her mother as if seeing her for the first time, not as a weak, aging inconvenience, but as a woman with a spine carved from years of survival. A woman who had been gentle so long that people mistook her kindness for helplessness. A woman rediscovering her strength in real time. Unable to accept this shift, Lauren stormed upstairs, her footsteps heavy and furious, like a child denied a toy. Doors slammed. Drawers opened and shut angrily. But Evelyn didn't chase her. She had chased enough things in life: love, acceptance, peace. And now she finally understood that some people only find their character when you stop carrying it for them. Evelyn walked to the window, looking out at the California sunlight pouring into the yard she had tended for decades. Roses she planted with her husband, olive trees that shaded summer afternoons, grass she watered while Lauren played barefoot as a little girl. The memories weren't painful anymore. They were reminders of who truly built this home. Not the loud voices, not the entitled tempers, but her own quiet resilience. She touched the window frame and felt a calm certainty settle into her bones. For the first time in years, the house felt like hers again, not physically but spiritually. A place where she didn't have to shrink. A place where her voice mattered. A place that would remain hers until she chose otherwise. Upstairs, the storm raged. Downstairs, the woman who once felt powerless stood unshaken. Evelyn had reclaimed more than a house. She had reclaimed herself. The rest of the day unfolded like a quiet battle inside the house, one where no voices were raised, yet the silence itself screamed truths everyone had avoided for years. Evelyn moved through the rooms calmly, picking up a few abandoned glasses, straightening cushions, wiping a dusty picture frame. She wasn't cleaning out of obligation. She was reclaiming her space with every gentle touch. Meanwhile, upstairs, Lauren paced back and forth in her bedroom, anger simmering inside her like a storm trapped behind glass. She couldn't understand how her mother had suddenly shifted the ground beneath her feet. All her life, Lauren had relied on Evelyn's silence to validate her authority. But now that silence had cracked open, revealing strength Lauren had never anticipated. As she paced, she muttered complaints under her breath, blaming Evelyn for everything. Her stress, her insecurities, her dissatisfaction with her own life. It was easier to blame the woman who had always forgiven her than to confront the truth staring back at her in the mirror. Eric eventually approached Lauren's door, knocking carefully as if afraid his own voice might trigger another explosion. "Lauren," he started softly, "maybe we should talk to your mom respectfully. She's not trying to hurt us." But Lauren snapped before he finished. "Respectfully? She humiliated me," she shouted. "She's using some stupid piece of paper to control us." Eric sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's her house, Lauren. Legally. And honestly, morally too. You know she's done everything for us." His voice trembled with guilt. Lauren ignored him, turning away sharply. The truth had never been her friend. It always demanded accountability she wasn't willing to face. Downstairs, Evelyn sat at the dining table with a soft cup of chamomile tea. Steam curled into the air, calming her nerves even as her heart beat faster than usual. She wasn't used to confrontation. Years of motherhood had taught her to swallow her own pain to keep the peace. But today something inside her refused to bend. She stared at the table's wooden grain, remembering how she and her husband had sanded and varnished it together. How they had dreamed of building a home filled with warmth, compassion, and mutual respect. Somewhere along the years that dream had slipped away. Not because life was cruel, but because she had allowed others to replace love with entitlement. Now she finally saw how deep the imbalance had grown. She was invisible to the very people who lived under her roof. But not anymore. As she sipped her tea, the front door opened, and she saw her neighbor, Mrs. Ramirez, peeking in with her gentle smile. "I saw your daughter leave earlier looking upset," she whispered. "Is everything okay, Querida?" Evelyn forced a smile. "Just a difficult day." Mrs. Ramirez stepped closer, placing a warm hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "You are stronger than you think. Don't let anyone treat you less than what you are." Her words were simple, but they settled deep into Evelyn's heart like an anchor. For years she had accepted mistreatment because she believed love required endurance. But now she realized something powerful. Love without respect is not love, it's servitude. When Mrs. Ramirez left, Evelyn rose from the table and walked toward the garden door, opening it to let the warm California light spill across her face. She stepped out into the yard, her bare feet brushing against the soft grass. Her daisies swayed gently in the breeze, and for a moment she felt her husband's presence beside her. steady, reassuring, reminding her that she wasn't alone in spirit. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, grounding herself in the earth she had nurtured for decades. Behind her, the sliding door opened with a sharp sound. Lauren stood there, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes burning with a mixture of wounded pride and disbelief. "So what now?" she demanded, her voice cracking under the tension. "Are you really going to throw us out?" Evelyn turned toward her slowly, her posture calm, her expression steady. "I'm not asking you to leave," she said. "I'm asking you to understand that this home has rules. The same rules you would expect in your own house. Respect, kindness, basic decency." Lauren scoffed. "You're turning this into drama. You're acting like I'm the bad guy." Evelyn met her gaze without blinking. "Sometimes," she said softly, "the truth sounds like drama to the person who created the mess." Lauren's face hardened, but behind the resistance was something new, uncertainty. She wasn't used to this version of her mother. She didn't know how to fight a strength she had never seen before. Evelyn stepped a little closer, but not threateningly. "This house is my life's foundation," she said. "I will not allow anyone, even my own daughter, to tear me down inside it." The words hung in the air like a verdict. And for the first time in her adult life, Lauren had no comeback. Evelyn wasn't the weak one anymore. She wasn't the background character. She wasn't the silent caretaker. She was the owner. She was the mother. She was the woman rediscovering her power. That night, the house felt different, quieter, heavier, but no longer cold. For the first time in years, Evelyn sat in the living room with the lights dimmed and the soft hum of the night drifting in from the garden. She didn't feel like a stranger here anymore. She didn't feel like someone intruding on a life that wasn't hers. The silence didn't suffocate her. It soothed her, reassuring her that the storm brewing upstairs was no longer hers to carry. Lauren remained in her room, pacing back and forth, trying to make sense of the shift she never saw coming. Her entitlement had always been her shield, but tonight it had cracked open, leaving her exposed to the reality she'd ignored for far too long. Eric lingered at the top of the stairs, debating whether to comfort his wife or apologize to a woman whose kindness he had taken for granted. He eventually chose to walk quietly downstairs, his footsteps hesitant as he approached Evelyn, who sat near the window nursing a warm cup of tea. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his eyes filled with genuine remorse. "We let things go too far. We treated you like you didn't matter. But you do. You always have." Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, her expression gentle but tired. She didn't respond with anger or bitterness. Instead, she nodded slowly, acknowledging his apology without letting it erase the pain of the past. "I know," she whispered, "but some things need to change." They sat in silence for a while, the tension easing just enough for honesty to flow. Eric rubbed his hands together nervously. "What should we do now?" he asked. Evelyn inhaled deeply, her voice steady. "Change starts with respect. If you and Lauren want to stay here, then we rebuild this home on kindness, not arrogance, not entitlement." Her words weren't a threat. They were a boundary she should have set years ago. Eric nodded, understanding that this time there would be no bending the rules. "I'll talk to her," he promised softly. He stood and returned upstairs, leaving Evelyn alone once more. But this time the loneliness didn't hurt. Felt peaceful, earned, liberating. Moments later, soft footsteps approached. Lauren appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her shoulders stiff, her eyes avoiding Evelyn's. She looked smaller tonight, not physically, but emotionally, like someone facing her reflection for the first time without filters. She walked toward the living room, her breathing uneven, an internal battle raging behind the calm facade she tried to maintain. "Mom," she began, but her voice cracked before she could continue. Evelyn turned slowly, her eyes meeting Lauren's with an unexpected softness. Lauren swallowed hard, her pride collapsing beneath the weight of her guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I shouldn't have talked to you that way. I shouldn't have threatened you. I don't know why I'm like this. I felt like everything was slipping, and I took it out on you." Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, and for once she didn't try to hide them. Evelyn didn't rush to embrace her or wipe her tears. She simply listened. For years she had silenced her own pain to protect Lauren's emotions, but this moment was different. Lauren needed to feel the weight of her wrongdoing, to understand the depth of the wound she had inflicted. When Evelyn finally spoke, her voice was soft but unwavering. "It's not about one moment, Lauren. It's about many years of forgetting who I am. I raised you with love, not so you would fear me, but so you would respect me. And respect is something I haven't felt from you in a very long time." Lauren nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks as the truth settled heavily on her heart. "I want to do better," she whispered. "I don't want to lose you." Evelyn sighed, her chest tightening at the sight of her daughter finally letting her walls fall. "Then start by seeing me," she replied gently. "Not as someone old. Not as a burden, but as your mother, as a person with worth." A long silence followed, but it wasn't the painful kind. It was the kind that comes right before healing begins. Lauren slowly stepped forward and knelt beside Evelyn's chair, resting her head on her mother's lap like she hadn't done since she was a child. Evelyn placed a hand on her hair, stroking it gently, her heart aching and mending at the same time. Under the dim lights of the living room, surrounded by the memories of a life rebuilt from brokenness, a small fragile piece began to take shape. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't sudden, but it was real. Outside, the night wind rustled through the olive trees Evelyn had planted decades ago. The house stood steady, grounded, and filled with a warmth that had been missing for far too long. And inside, Evelyn realized something profound. This wasn't just the end of a painful chapter. It was the beginning of a new one. A chapter where she wasn't invisible. A chapter where she wasn't silent. A chapter where she wasn't small. For the first time in years, Evelyn Collins felt like the owner of her home, her heart, and her life.